Mary Whitlow stood on the edge of the dusty road with her small travel bag gripped tightly in her hands. The morning sun was still low, spreading a soft golden light across the Wyoming plains. The air was cold, but Mary hardly noticed. Her thoughts were full of everything she had lost and everything she still needed to protect. Just months earlier, her life had felt steady and ordinary. She lived in a small wooden house with her husband, Daniel, and their young son, Thomas. They had little, but they had enough, and there was comfort in that simple life. Daniel was a hard-working man who tended to cattle and traded goods when times were slow. Mary mended clothes for neighbors and baked bread to sell in town. They were poor, but they were hopeful. Then the fever came. It started with Daniel feeling weak after working long hours in the summer sun. Within days, his skin turned pale and hot, and he struggled to breathe. Mary did everything she could: cool cloths, homemade broth, prayers whispered late into the night. But nothing helped. One morning, before the birds even sang, Daniel took his final breath. Mary held his hand until it grew cold, unable to understand how the world could keep turning while hers stopped. The neighbors gave what comfort they could, but they were struggling too. Food was short, money was shorter, and kindness could not fill a pantry. Mary's small savings disappeared quickly: medicine, burial costs, and the simple cost of living. She worked twice as hard, sewing late at night and baking before sunrise, but winter was approaching fast, and the needs of a growing boy could not wait. She knew she needed steady work, not just temporary jobs that paid a few coins. People in town often spoke of the ranches spread across the open land. Some ranchers hired help for cooking, cleaning, and mending. It wasn't glamorous work, but Mary didn't care about glamour, only survival. Her son needed warm clothes, proper meals, and a secure place to sleep. She had promised Daniel she would raise their boy with strength, and she meant to keep that promise. Mary heard that Tom Braddock, owner of one of the largest ranches in the area, sometimes hired extra hands during busy seasons. He was known for his wealth and wide lands, though his reputation came with a mixture of pride and fear. Some said he was generous when he wanted to be. Others said he had a temper that could turn a peaceful day into a storm. But Mary could not be picky. She needed any honest work she could get. So she packed her bag at dawn, kissed her sleeping child on the forehead, asked her neighbor Mrs. Turner to watch him for the day, and began the long walk toward Braddock Ranch. The journey took hours. Her boots kicked up small clouds of dust as she followed the winding road. She paused now and then to rest, wiping her palms against her skirt. Each step carried both hope and anxiety. She rehearsed what she would say: that she could cook well, sew fast, and keep a house clean. She would not ask for much, just a fair wage and a chance. By the time she reached the ranch gate, the sun had climbed higher, warming her back. The ranch stretched wide across the land, with wooden fences and grazing cattle. A few ranch hands worked in the distance, leading horses or stacking hay. The house itself was large, with a tall porch and heavy wooden beams. It was the kind of house that made Mary feel even smaller than she already did. She swallowed hard, brushed off her skirt, and walked toward the front steps. Her heart thumped loudly in her chest. She reminded herself that she had survived worse. She had buried a husband. She had held her son through nights of hunger. She had walked miles under the sun with nothing but determination pushing her forward. She could knock on a door. Mary raised her hand and tapped gently at first, then a bit louder. A few seconds passed before the door opened. Standing there was Tom Braddock, tall, broad-shouldered, and frowning as if the very act of opening the door annoyed him. His eyes were sharp and assessing, scanning her from head to toe. Mary felt her palms grow damp, but she kept her posture straight. "Good morning, sir," she said softly but clearly. "My name is Mary Whitlow. I heard you might need help around the ranch. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, anything that needs doing. I'm willing to work hard." Braddock stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched long enough for Mary to feel her breath tightening. She wondered if she should speak again, but something told her to stay quiet and wait. He finally leaned against the doorframe, his gaze narrowing. "You're looking for work?" he asked, his voice deep and slow. "Yes, sir," she answered. "Any honest work you can offer." Mary kept her voice steady, though she felt a trembling in her chest. She clutched her small bag tightly, reminding herself that she had come too far to lose courage now. She thought of Thomas waiting at home, unaware of how much depended on this moment. The ranch yard was quiet except for the distant lowing of cattle. A light breeze brushed against Mary's cheeks, carrying the scent of hay and dust. She tried to read Braddock's expression, hoping to see a sign of kindness, or at least fairness. But his face revealed nothing. She could not tell if he was thinking or judging, considering her words, or dismissing them entirely. Mary did her best to stay calm. She reminded herself that she was not begging for charity. She was offering her work, her skill, her time. She had earned respect through years of helping her husband, her neighbors, and the community around her. She knew how to work from sunrise to sundown without complaint. She knew how to stretch every penny and how to solve problems with quiet creativity. She was not helpless, and she refused to let anyone make her feel that way. She waited for Braddock's answer, hoping he would see her determination rather than her desperation. She hoped he would understand that she was simply a widow trying to provide for her child. She hoped this long walk, this long morning, would finally bring a little piece of good fortune. But as she stood there on the porch, looking into the hard eyes of the rancher, she sensed that whatever happened next would shape her life in ways she could not yet imagine. Still, she kept her chin lifted. She kept her voice gentle. She kept her heart steady. Because Mary Whitlow was not a woman who gave up, not when the world turned cold, not when doors closed, and not when life forced her to start over again and again. She knew that hope was not always easy. Sometimes hope was a long walk on a dusty road with tired feet and an empty pocket. Sometimes hope was knocking on a stranger's door with nothing but courage to carry you forward. And that was exactly what she brought to this ranch: courage, hope, and a quiet determination that had carried her through every hardship so far. Whatever Braddock's answer would be, Mary was ready to face it. She had to be, for herself and for her son. Mary waited on the porch, her hands folded in front of her, trying to remain calm even though her heart was beating fast. Rancher Tom Braddock didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her with a long, heavy stare, as if he were trying to decide what kind of person she was just by the way she stood. Mary kept her eyes lowered, not wanting to seem rude, but she also kept her shoulders straight, wanting to show that she wasn't afraid to work. Finally, Braddock stepped back slightly, crossing his arms over his chest. His voice came out low and sharp. "You sure you can handle work out here?" he asked. "This ain't an easy place. Sun's hot, winter's cold, and chores don't wait." Mary nodded quickly. "I can handle hard work, sir. I've been working since I was young. I can cook, clean, sew, look after animals. I'm willing to learn whatever I need." Braddock tilted his head, studying her again. He didn't look impressed. His eyes narrowed a little more, and Mary felt a sting of worry in her stomach. She hoped he wasn't about to turn her away. She thought of her son, Thomas, probably playing with his small wooden horse, unaware of how much his mother needed this chance. Mary clutched the handle of her bag a little tighter, praying this man would give her one simple opportunity. But instead of answering her, Braddock gave a short, dry laugh. The sound wasn't warm or friendly. It was the kind of laugh a person gave when they felt more powerful than someone else. Mary felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment, though she didn't know exactly why. "So you walked all the way out here thinking I'd just hand you a nice little job?" Braddock said, raising an eyebrow. "Cooking, cleaning, sewing. Plenty of folks want those jobs. What makes you think I'd pick you?" Mary swallowed. She had expected questions, but not like this. She forced herself to speak calmly. "Because I need the work and I'll do it well. I'm not afraid of long hours." Braddock leaned closer, enough to make her take a small step back. "Needing something doesn't mean you get it," he said. "World doesn't work that way, Miss Whitlow." Mary felt a wave of helplessness rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. She knew giving up would mean going home with nothing, and she couldn't do that. Not after all she had faced. So she stood firm. "I understand, sir. But I came here because I heard you hire people when the ranch is busy. I'll take less pay if needed. I just want honest work." Braddock stared at her for several moments longer. His expression grew harder, not softer. Then he stepped fully into the doorway, blocking it completely. His voice lowered to a tone that made Mary uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. "The only job I have here," he said slowly, "is not the kind of job you're talking about." Mary froze. She had expected many possibilities: rejection, acceptance, a small chance at negotiation. But she had not expected this. There was something in his tone she didn't like, something that made her stomach twist. She didn't know how to respond yet. Her breath felt heavy in her chest. She tried to stay polite, thinking maybe she misunderstood him. "I'm looking for respectable work," she said softly. "Nothing more." Braddock's eyes narrowed further. "Well, that's the thing," he replied. "I don't need cooking or cleaning done. I can pay ranch hands for that. If you're looking for a place here, you'd have to fit into my household in another way." Mary understood then what he meant, not through any bad words spoken, but from the tone he used and the look in his eyes. Her heart thudded painfully. She took another step back, trying to keep her voice steady and calm. "I came for real work, sir," she said firmly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing else." Braddock gave a sharp snort, as though amused by her attempt to remain dignified. "Then you knocked on the wrong door," he said, "and you should have thought twice before wasting my time." He stepped forward slightly, as if expecting her to panic or apologize. Mary did neither. She held her gaze downward, wanting to show respect, but not fear. "I'm sorry to have bothered you," she said quietly, though her throat felt tight. "I'll take my leave." She turned quickly, not waiting for his reply. As she stepped off the porch, she heard the door slam behind her, loud enough to echo across the open yard. She flinched at the sound, but she didn't let herself look back. Her steps were fast at first, almost frantic, but she slowed after a few yards, remembering she didn't want to draw attention. She wiped the corner of her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. She wasn't crying, but the sting behind her eyes was strong, stronger than she wanted it to be. She had walked a long way. She had come with hope. And now she was leaving with less than she had arrived with, because now she also carried disappointment and a deeper understanding of how difficult her journey would be. Mary's mind raced as she walked back toward the road. She felt embarrassed, angry, and frightened all at once. But most of all, she felt confused. Why had he spoken to her like that? Why would someone turn such a simple request into something so unpleasant? She took a deep breath, letting the crisp air cool her burning cheeks. She reminded herself that one unkind man did not represent the entire world. She had met good people before, many of them. Her husband had been gentle and fair. Her neighbor, Mrs. Turner, was kind-hearted. There were ranchers in the area known for their fairness. She had to believe she could still find work from someone honest. Mary slowed her steps even more as she reached the main road. She looked back once, just to put the ranch behind her in her mind, then wiped her hands on her skirt and lifted her chin slightly. She would not let this moment break her spirit. She had survived loss. She had survived sleepless nights, hunger, fear, and loneliness. She would survive one rancher's harsh words, too. But this encounter taught her something important, that not everyone she approached would be kind or respectful. She would need to be more careful, more aware. Still, she refused to give up. With each step forward, she repeated the same promise to herself. She would find honest work. She would protect her son. And she would keep moving no matter how many doors closed. Only one thing worried her: the way Braddock had looked at her before she walked away, as if he wasn't used to being refused. The look wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder, something that made the hairs on Mary's arms rise. She didn't know then that her refusal had stirred something in him, something that would soon create trouble not just for her, but for others as well. But Mary kept walking. The road forward was long, but so was her courage. She didn't know where she would work next, but she knew one thing for certain. She was not returning to Braddock Ranch, no matter how desperate times became. And that decision, made with quiet strength, would shape the rest of her path in ways she could not yet see. Mary continued walking along the dusty road, each step carrying her farther from the ranch that had left her shaken. The sun hung higher now, warming her shoulders, but the warmth did little to ease the cold worry glimmering inside her chest. She replayed the moment on the porch again and again. Braddock's sharp tone, his heavy stare, the disappointment weighing in her heart. She had been prepared for rejection, but not the kind she had received. Still, she kept her head up. She reminded herself she had done nothing wrong. Wanting an honest job was not something to be ashamed of. As she reached the small wooden bridge on the path to town, she stopped to rest. She leaned against the railing, taking a slow breath. The stream beneath her moved gently, reflecting patches of bright sky. She watched the water flow, wishing her life could move so easily. She wondered what she should do now. There were other ranches scattered across the countryside, but most were miles away. She wasn't sure she could walk that far with her tired feet and empty stomach. She considered going home for the day, but the thought filled her with guilt. She didn't want to return to her son without at least trying again. She didn't want Thomas to see the worry on her face, even though he was too young to understand everything. He always looked at her with trust, believing she could solve anything. Mary wanted to protect that trust. She wanted to be strong for him. As she stood there thinking, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. She turned slowly, her heart jumping for a moment, afraid it might be Braddock following her. But instead, she saw a middle-aged woman in a long blue dress, carrying a basket filled with cloth and thread. Her graying hair was tied neatly behind her head, and her gentle face showed a look of curiosity. "Are you all right, dear?" the woman asked, slowing her steps as she reached the bridge. Mary straightened herself, wiping her palms on her skirt. "Yes, ma'am," she said quietly, "just stopping to rest." The woman looked at her closely, noticing the slight redness around Mary's eyes, the exhaustion in her posture, and the small bag at her side. "You seem troubled," she said softly. "If you don't mind me asking, were you coming from Braddock Ranch? You're walking from that direction." Mary hesitated. She didn't want to cause trouble or spread anything that sounded like gossip, but she also felt the weight of the morning pressing on her, and talking to someone kind might help her breathe again. "I went there looking for work," Mary said gently, "but things didn't go as I hoped." The woman nodded slowly, as if she already expected such an answer. "My name's Eleanor Briggs," she said with a warm smile. "I run the general store in town. Why don't you walk with me? You look like you could use a place to sit and maybe a warm cup of tea. No charge." Mary blinked, surprised by the kindness. "That's very generous," she said, "but I don't want to be a burden." "Nonsense," Eleanor replied firmly. A person in need is never a burden in my eyes. Come now, it's a long walk to town. We'll talk along the way. Mary felt something inside her loosen, a small knot of tension easing. She nodded and walked beside Eleanor. The road felt a little less lonely with someone at her side. They walked together, talking quietly. Eleanor asked about Mary's son, and Mary happily shared a few simple stories, grateful for a change of subject. After several minutes, Eleanor finally said, I've heard of other women visiting that ranch asking for work. Most leave with the same quiet, uncomfortable look you have right now. She glanced at Mary gently. You don't have to tell me details if you don't want to. But I've got a sense that something wasn't right. Mary took a slow breath. She didn't want to mention anything unkind or inappropriate, but she did want to be honest with this woman who had shown her compassion. He spoke to me in a way that made it clear he wasn't offering real work, Mary said carefully, and when I said no, he became angry. I left right away. Eleanor's expression softened with sympathy and a hint of frustration. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, dear, she said. Men like him forget that strength doesn't come from power. It comes from character. You showed more character walking away than he's shown in years. Hearing those words made Mary's throat tighten. She hadn't realized how badly she needed someone to say she had done the right thing. For a moment, she looked down at her hands, trying to hold back the emotion rising within her. Thank you, she whispered. Eleanor touched her arm gently. You're not the first woman he's spoken to like that, and sadly, you might not be the last. That's why I think you should talk to Sheriff Reeves when we reach town. Mary's eyes widened. The sheriff? Yes, Eleanor said with a firm nod. Sheriff Alton Reeves is a good man, fair and patient. He's been keeping his eye on Braddock for some time. Hearing your experience might help him understand how serious this situation has become. You don't have to accuse anyone. You just have to tell the truth. Sometimes the truth opens doors that have been stuck closed for too long. Mary felt uncertain. She had never spoken to the sheriff before. She didn't want to start trouble, and she certainly didn't want to become the center of town talk. But another part of her, the part that knew she had been treated disrespectfully, felt a strange sense of responsibility. What if her silence meant other women had to face the same thing? What if speaking up could protect someone else? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked in silence for a moment, thinking carefully. Eleanor didn't push her. She simply walked alongside her, giving her time. When they finally reached the town, the air smelled of warm bread and dust. The small buildings lined the street with calm familiarity. Mary had walked through this place many times, but today it felt different, like she was walking into the next part of her story, even if she didn't know what it would hold. Eleanor guided her into the general store. The moment Mary stepped inside, she felt warmth, not just from the stove crackling in the corner, but from the simple comfort of a safe, clean space. Eleanor poured her tea and offered her a seat near the back of the store, away from customers. After a few minutes, the door opened again, and Sheriff Reeves stepped inside. He was a tall man in his 40s with calm eyes and a steady walk. Eleanor waved him over with a meaningful glance. "Sheriff," she said gently, "this is Mary Whitlow. She has something important to share with you." Mary's heart jumped. Her hands tightened around her teacup, but she reminded herself of everything she had survived. She reminded herself that truth was not harm, it was protection. Sheriff Reeves sat across from her, his posture respectful and patient. "Ma'am," he said kindly, "you have nothing to fear here. I'm here to listen." Mary took a slow breath. It wasn't easy to revisit the morning, but she told him everything carefully. Every word said, every look that made her uneasy. She didn't exaggerate, and she didn't accuse more than needed. She simply spoke the truth, steady and quiet. As she finished, Sheriff Reeves nodded slowly. His jaw tightened slightly, showing he had taken her words seriously. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "And I'm sorry you went through that. You're not alone in this. I've received similar concerns from others, but your account gives me something clearer to act on." Mary blinked in surprise. She wasn't the only one. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on Mary's shoulder, giving her silent support. Sheriff Reeves continued, "With your permission, I'll make a record of what you shared. Nothing will be done without care, but your courage today could help others stay safe." Mary felt a trembling breath escape her. She hadn't expected this moment to feel so heavy or so powerful. She nodded softly. "Yes, Sheriff." "You may." And with that simple agreement, her life began to shift. She didn't know what would happen next or how her story would unfold, but she felt something she hadn't felt since her husband passed away. A sense of strength rising again, slow but real. A turning point had come, not through anger or force, but through honesty, courage, and the kindness of strangers who refused to let her stand alone. Sheriff Reeves listened carefully as Mary finished speaking, and for the first time since she left Braddock Ranch, she felt like someone truly understood what she had experienced. His calm voice and steady presence helped her breathe a little easier. He didn't rush her, didn't doubt her. He simply took in her words with seriousness and respect. When Mary stepped out of the store later that afternoon, she wasn't sure what would happen next. But she felt a small piece of her worry lift, like a heavy stone had been taken off her shoulders. She had spoken the truth. She had done her part. Now all she could do was hope that something good would come from it. Over the next few days, life in town moved as usual, but something different stirred beneath the surface. Sheriff Reeves spoke quietly with people who had visited the ranch before. Some nodded with tight lips, others looked away, uncomfortable. But more than one woman shared a story that matched Mary's in different ways. The sheriff wrote every detail down, building a clearer picture of what had been happening for far too long. Mary didn't know about all of this yet. She was busy searching for work again, going from shop to shop and ranch to ranch. Most places were polite, but unable to hire. Times were tough. Winter was close. Still, she kept trying. Each night she returned home tired, but Thomas's joyful welcome always lifted her spirits. He would run to her with small drawings or stories about the neighbor's dog, and Mary would kneel beside him, listening as if nothing else in the world mattered. She didn't tell him about Braddock. She didn't want to fill his young mind with worry. Instead, she would smile and say, "Mama's working on it. We'll be all right." And she meant it, even if her voice sometimes felt shakier than she wanted. On the fourth morning after she spoke to the sheriff, Mary went to town to look for sewing jobs. As she passed the general store, Eleanor stepped out quickly and called to her, "Mary, come here, dear." Mary hurried over, curious. Eleanor's face held a mixture of relief and importance. "The sheriff has been looking for you," Eleanor said. "He wants to meet with you this afternoon at his office. Nothing to worry about, just an update." Mary nodded slowly. Her heart fluttered with nerves, but she trusted Sheriff Reeves. She spent the next few hours attempting to keep her mind focused on small tasks, mending a neighbor's torn jacket, sorting through her thread, checking prices at the market. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the sheriff's request. What could he possibly want to tell her? Finally, when the sun sat halfway across the sky, she made her way to the sheriff's office. She knocked gently, and the door opened almost immediately. "Mrs. Whitlow," Sheriff Reeves said with a respectful nod. "Come in." He guided her inside and offered her a chair. The office was quiet, lit by soft afternoon light pouring through the window. A stack of papers sat neatly on the desk, and Mary noticed that many pages were filled with handwriting. "I wanted to thank you again for your courage," the sheriff began. "Your story helped others come forward. You were not alone in what you faced." Mary felt a mixture of sadness and sympathy, She didn't want others to have gone through similar discomfort, but she was relieved she had not been the only voice. The sheriff continued, "With these statements, I now have enough to speak with Mr. Braddock directly. I will not go alone. The townsfolk deserve to be protected, and a man with his influence should not act without accountability." Mary swallowed hard. "Do you think he'll deny everything?" "He might," the sheriff said. "But the truth has a way of showing itself, especially when several people speak it together." He gave her a patient smile. "You will not need to confront him. That is my responsibility. I just wanted you to know action is being taken." Mary nodded slowly. "Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate your efforts." He lifted a hand humbly. "It's my duty. But seeing the strength of those who came forward made my job clearer." Mary left his office with a strange mix of hope and nervousness. She knew that speaking to a man like Braddock would not be simple. He wasn't used to being challenged. He was rich, powerful, and unpredictable. But she trusted the sheriff to handle it with fairness. All she could do now was wait. Later that evening, as Mary sat with Thomas, helping him sort through his little wooden blocks, there came a knock on her door. It startled her. Visitors were rare at this hour. She opened the door to find two ranch hands she recognized from the edge of town. Both held their hats respectfully in their hands. "Mrs. Whitlow," one asked, "we heard you're looking for work. Our ranch could use someone like you. Cooking, cleaning, whatever you can do, we can pay fair wages." Mary blinked in surprise. "How did you hear that?" The ranch hand smiled shyly. "Word travels fast, and folks want to help when they can. We heard you've had a bit of a hard time lately. Thought we'd step forward." Warm gratitude filled Mary's chest. She smiled softly. "I'd be glad to come by tomorrow morning." When the two men left, Mary closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope brighten inside her, small but strong. The next morning, she visited the ranch that had offered her work. It wasn't big or grand like Braddock's. The buildings were worn, the fences patched in places, and the barn leaned slightly to one side. But the moment she walked in, she felt a sense of honesty in the air. Simple, hard-working people doing their best. "Mrs. Whitlow," the ranch owner, Mr. Harper, greeted her warmly. "Heard good things about you. Let's talk about the work." They sat at a picnic table outside the barn, and Mary listened carefully as he described the chores: cooking for the workers, sweeping the bunkhouse, mending clothes on weekends. In return, he offered fair pay and respect. "I don't expect perfection," he said with a gentle smile. "Just effort and kindness. And from the look of it, you've got both." Mary felt her eyes sting with emotion. She accepted the job right away. As the day went on, she swept floors, washed dishes, and prepared simple meals. The ranch hands thanked her kindly. Not once did anyone speak rudely or look at her with disrespect. It was honest work, tiring but peaceful. For the first time since her husband's passing, she felt a sense of stability creeping back into her life. But the real turning point came that evening. As Mary walked home from her first full day of work, she saw a small crowd gathered outside the sheriff's office. People spoke in low voices, their expressions serious. Mary's steps slowed. She approached carefully. Eleanor noticed her and hurried over. "It's all right, dear," Eleanor said. "The sheriff confronted Braddock today, right in front of witnesses." Mary's breath caught. "And what happened?" Eleanor took her hands gently. "He didn't take it well at first. He argued, tried to raise his voice, but the sheriff stayed calm. And when other folks stepped up and told their stories, well, Braddock couldn't deny everything anymore." Mary felt her heart pounding. "What will happen to him?" she asked. "He won't be jailed, but he has been fined heavily," Eleanor explained. And the sheriff made it clear that any more behavior like that will bring stronger consequences. People are finally standing up to him. He's not as untouchable as he thought. Mary looked toward the sheriff, who stood speaking with a few townspeople. He looked tired but firm, like a man who had taken a long-needed step for the good of his community. Mary released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. There was no feeling of victory in her heart, just relief. Relief that no one else would have to face what she had. Relief that someone in authority cared enough to act. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Mary began walking home again. The sky above her blazed orange and pink with the setting sun. Thomas would be waiting, eager to hear about her day. And this time, she had good news to share. Safe work, kind people, and a community that was beginning to look out for one another. The road ahead was still long, but Mary felt stronger now. She had spoken up, stood firm, and found support in unexpected places. The world had tested her, but she had not broken. And as she walked into the warm glow of her little home, she realized something important. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet truth spoken in a small office. Sometimes it's a single step away from the wrong door and toward the right one. Mary spent the next few months slowly settling into a new rhythm of life, one that felt gentler and safer than anything she had known since her husband's passing. Each morning began with the soft sound of birds outside the small bunkhouse where she stayed. She would open her eyes, take a long breath, and remind herself that she was truly beginning again. It was not an easy journey, but it was a hopeful one. For the first time in a long while, she felt that her days were building toward something steady instead of falling apart piece by piece. The cattle outfit where she worked was not large, but the people were kind. They greeted her with warm nods and friendly smiles. No one looked at her with judgment or pity. They simply welcomed her as part of the team. Even though the ranch hands worked long hours and came back dusty and tired, they always treated Mary with respect. They asked politely for meals, praised her cooking, and offered to carry heavy items whenever she struggled. Mary found comfort in their simple decency. Every day she helped prepare breakfast, packed lunches for the workers, washed dishes, and mended torn clothing. The tasks were tiring, but they gave her purpose. She moved through the kitchen with care, enjoying the warmth of the stove, the smell of fresh biscuits, and the soft chatter of people who were grateful for her presence. More than once, the ranch owner told her, "You're doing wonderful work, Mrs. Whitlow. This place feels better with you here." Those words stayed in her heart. In the evenings, after her chores were done and her young son was asleep, Mary would sit outside the bunkhouse on a wooden stool. She would watch the sunset paint the sky pink, orange, and gold. The land looked peaceful from where she sat. Rolling fields, calm cattle, a distant barn, a sky full of stars. Sometimes she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and simply listened to the quiet. Other times she stitched small quilts or repaired clothes lit by a lantern's glow. Every night she felt a little more settled, a little more secure. Yet even with all the new peace in her life, Mary still carried the memory of all she had gone through. Some memories were harder to shake than others. She remembered the long, cold nights when she worried about how she would feed her child. She remembered walking from one ranch to another, exhausted and afraid, but refusing to stop trying. She remembered the moment when she had been spoken to unfairly and the shock she felt afterward. But she also remembered her own courage, how she stood tall, how she kept her dignity, and how she walked away. When people in town learned what Mary had faced and how bravely she had handled it, many admired her deeply. Some women approached her quietly, thanking her for speaking up and saying she had inspired them to be stronger too. Shopkeepers greeted her with encouraging smiles. A few townsfolk even brought her extra fabric scraps or small bags of flour, wanting to help her business grow when she was ready. Mary felt shy accepting kindness, but grateful. She had never sought attention. She had only wanted honest work and a safe life for her son. The sheriff, who had been so supportive during her most difficult days, often checked in on her to make sure she was doing well. He respected her strength and appreciated how her statement helped others step forward. His efforts had created a new sense of fairness in town. People now knew they had someone they could trust if they ever needed help. Mary thought often about how one brave moment from her had encouraged a quiet change across the community. As winter gave way to spring, Mary's life grew brighter. She saved every small coin she earned, placing them carefully inside a tin box she kept hidden under her bed. Week after week, the amount grew. Some evenings she would open the box, count the coins, and smile softly. It wasn't much, but it was hers. It represented work she had earned honestly, without fear, without anyone taking advantage of her. She felt proud of herself each time she added a few more coins. By early spring, she had saved enough to rent a small cabin near the edge of town. It was nothing grand, just a single room with a tiny kitchen and a small fenced space outside. But to Mary, it felt like a dream. When she moved her few belongings inside, she walked around slowly, touching the walls, imagining how she and her son would make it a home. She pictured a small garden behind the cabin, maybe a row of carrots or potatoes. She even pictured sewing curtains to hang in the windows, letting sunlight brighten the room. Soon after settling in, she began offering sewing services from her cabin. She hung a small wooden sign near the door that read, "Mending, Stitching, Quilts, Whitlow Sewing." At first, she wondered if anyone would come, but within a week, her small table was piled with shirts needing patches, dresses needing hems, and blankets needing repairs. Word spread quickly that Mary worked neatly and charged fairly. Some people came simply because they wanted to support her. She welcomed each customer with a warm smile, often serving tea while discussing what needed mending. Her son loved the new cabin as well. He played outside freely, running through grass with a stick as his imaginary horse. Mary enjoyed watching him laugh, his face bright and carefree. She was thankful that he was too young to fully understand the difficult time they had gone through. Now he only knew safety and comfort. His happiness reminded Mary why she had fought so hard in the first place. Everything she did was for him. As spring deepened, Mary felt herself growing stronger emotionally. She no longer walked with the heavy weight of worry pressing on her shoulders. Instead, she moved through her days with purpose and calm. She had work she enjoyed, a home she could call her own, and a community that respected her. She often thought back to the moment she had stood up for herself and realized it had changed her whole path. One warm afternoon, she sat outside her cabin with her sewing basket beside her. The air smelled of fresh grass, and a breeze carried soft sounds from the nearby road. As she stitched the edge of a quilt, she reflected on everything she had been through: the loss of her husband, the struggles to survive,